new features of the Canon R6 Mark II, and what's the difference between the original R6, the Canon R5, and also the competition, the Sony a7 IV. This is a review from a Sony user. I have used Canon in the past, but after using the R6 Mark II for the last week, it really surprised me, and I think I might be a little bit wrong about Canon cameras. So I tested on 2 portrait shoots for photo and video, so I'll be rolling some examples as we talk about the R6 Mark II. That's awesome. Oh wow, you're gonna love these photos. They're actually looking so good. Thank you DigiDirect for loaning me this camera. So what are the new features of the Canon R6 Mark II? The original R6 had 20.1 megapixels. Now you're getting 24.2. So you're getting a bump in resolution for photos. The layout's a little bit different. You now get a dedicated video to photo switch. Thank God. Previously on the R6 and even the R5, you had to hit the mode and then go into info, then switch the video. When now on the R6 Mark II, you can literally just switch it between photo and video. You still get that 12 frames per second mechanical shutter, but now they've doubled the electronic shutter to 40 frames per second. They've updated the autofocus system, so now you almost get the same autofocus that you'll see in the Canon R3. The autofocus system is something that really surprised me. It worked amazing, very snappy on the eye, and as you can see when I'm culling my photos here in Narrative Select, it basically got every single photo in focus. Even when a strand of hair or even the whole lot of hair would come into the face, it would still somehow get the eye in focus. And it did an amazing job selecting which eye was closest to the lens. I used 2 lenses, one of them being the 28-70 f2. That is a bit of a beast of a lens. I love that lens. I really wish they had that for the Sony system. And also I just used the kit lens on the other portrait shoot with Lily, the 24-105 f4. I never seen myself using an f4 zoom lens before, but I actually really liked it for photos and I loved it for videos. It was incredibly stable with the in-body stabilization on the camera and also the stabilized lens on the 24-105. Now for video, you're getting a 6K downsample to 4K. So what does that really mean? Well, it basically just gives you a sharper 4K image. You now can record that 6K in a RAW format if you record it to a Atomos Ninja 5 or external recording. Me, I personally would avoid that. I feel like it's way too much work. It's way bigger file sizes. And also you don't actually gain that much from the raw data. You might get a bump in dynamic range slightly, but unlike a Red cinema camera where you get the raw white balance and the raw ISO, it doesn't really make it worth it. Plus, for some reason, Canon still have small HDMI cables, which are flimsy and tiny. So the highest frame rate you can record at 4K is 60 frames per second. Now, this has one little caveat where it has a bit of a record limit. When Canon released it, they did say you'll get about 40 minutes until the camera overheats, and I can confirm this through a source that I really trust, and that's Gerald Undone. I'll link his video down below, and he got 42 minutes recording at 4K 60. But for 4K 24, 25 and 30 frames per second, they have scrapped the record limit. So now you can record as long as you want. So you guys can do something like what I'm basically doing right now. I'm doing a long take in 4K 25 frames per second on my Sony a7 IV, and it's not gonna have a record limit or it's not gonna overheat. I think the overheating issues is gonna take a little bit of time to really get the confidence up with Canon. They have struggled in the past, but with recent firmware updates on the R5, the original R6, and now the R6 Mark II, I think they have finally resolved the overheating issues. So who did they actually make this camera for? Well, I know a ton of wedding videographers and photographers that avoided this camera for 2 reasons. One being that 20 megapixels was not enough for photo resolution. I think there's a bit of a lame excuse, but I can see what they mean because of print sizes, and also if you're someone like me that loves to crop a photo, and also the record limit of 4K 24, 25 and 30 frames per second. So most of my friends went out and bought the R5 that has amazing video specs. It is a 45 megapixel camera for photos, but the R5 5 is $3,800 USD at the time of recording this video, compared to the R6 Mark II, which is only $2,500 USD. So now with these new features of the R6 Mark II, I think it's definitely going to be a lot more popular than the original R6. Thank you to the DigiDirect Brisbane store for loaning me this camera. If you guys are in Australia, make sure you walk into one of their stores nationwide. I personally tried to buy all of my camera gear through DigiDirect, and walking in store and getting that in-store experience, I just feel way more confident than buying online. So if you guys are in Australia, make sure you check out one of their stores nationwide. So the Canon R6 Mark II is an amazing camera, but how well does it compete against the competition, the Sony a7 IV? The a7 IV has a larger megapixel count of 33 megapixels, while the R6 Mark II has at 24.2. I don't think this is a massive factor, but it just allows you to give you more resolution for cropping and also printing your guys' work. Sony does have a 4K 60 crop, while the Canon R6 records the full frame, but it does have that tendency to overheat in 4K 60. Personally, I don't actually know when you would want to record a long take, longer than say 2 to 3 minutes of 4K 60. Sony definitely does have a better log profile. S-Log3 has more dynamic range. I think it is more color accurate between all the different cameras in Sony's camera lineup. I did really enjoy the C-Log3, but I really wish they added C-Log2. And talking about picture profiles, on the Sony a7 IV, you can actually record in 10-bit 422 in a standard picture profile. 10-bit gives you way more colors, way more dynamic range, and way better for color grading, while for some reason on Canon cameras they only give you 8-bit options for shooting standard. I think this is a big mistake, Canon. Canon do have really good in-body stabilization, almost too good, especially when you go to wider lenses. You get this kind of Canon wobble in the corners, where Sony have kind of taken a step back, not overdone it in their IBIS system, and given you the option to use post-stabilization through gyro data. Canon definitely has a slight edge on autofocus, and I also really enjoy the raw photos coming straight out of camera. For a quick comparison, here is the R6 Mark II, here's the Sony a7 IV, and here is also the Fuji H2S raw photo right next to each other, so you guys can have a look for yourself. But the major difference between Sony and Canon right now is that Canon for some reason have not opened up the RF mount system. You cannot buy third-party glass for Canon cameras, where if you go out and buy the Sony, you can get amazing glass from Sigma and Tamron, or even what I'm shooting on right now, the Viltrox 13mm f1.4. Third-party glass is very sharp, the autofocus is amazing, color rendition is nice, but also it is a third of the price. If you guys want to see a more in-depth video about the differences between the a7 IV and the Canon R6 Mark II, I actually made a video about it. You guys can watch that right here. Or make sure you subscribe, because 2023 is going to be a massive year for this channel. I'm going back to New Zealand for a bit, so we're going to do a photo vlog back in NZ. We're going to go back to Bali. We're going to go to Brazil. It's going to be amazing. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next week.